Okay, finishing up our statistics unit. Okay, is the last one, which is calculating margin of error. Okay, this first page right here, which is page 15 or 16, I believe. Okay, the biggest thing about this page that I want you to do is circle this right here. Okay, that is how you calculate the margin of error. Okay, go ahead and put little stars next to this because this tells you exactly what all of these symbols mean. 1.96 is always there no matter what. If we are finding the margin of error at 95%, which is the only percent margin of error we will find in here, then your number right here, 1.96, is always going to be there. Okay, your cute little circle should be what's written right here. Okay, your circle with the little curly Q on top is your standard deviation, and N is the number of pieces of data that you have. Okay, again, you have your margin of error is how you get, or was what you get when you take 1.96 and multiply it by your standard deviation divided by the square root of however many pieces of data you have. Okay, best thing is you will always get the standard deviation and the number of data. Okay, so you basically just plug it in your calculator in one step and hit enter, and you have calculated the margin of error. Okay, to find a confidence interval, it's just like we did. Think back to when we did the whole little section on basketball scores, when we did that mean absolute deviation thing, and we said that if they scored between these two values, they were good. Well, over here, we take our average and subtract whatever we get for the margin of error, and then we take the average and we add the margin of error, and that basically gives us a range, or what they call a confidence interval of where our population mean is going to be. Okay, so again, this sounds super complicated, but it's really just a bunch of plugging and chugging in your calculator. So flip it over to the next page and let's do it. Okay, it says a football coach randomly selected 8 players and timed how long it took them to perform a certain drill, and here are the times. Okay, assuming the times follow a normal distribution, find the following. Okay, well, guess what? Whoops, sorry about that. We have the ability to calculate this super quick in our calculator. Okay, edit, and I'm going to put these numbers in there. If I can make this smaller. And I can't. Okay, so I have 10, 6, 6 and 5, 8 and 7, and 7 and 8. Okay, I have hopefully 8 players. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep, 8 players. Okay, stat edit, remember, or stat calc, sorry. And we need to get our average. Sorry. And our standard deviation, which are both listed right there in front of us in our calculator. Average 7.1, we'll say 7.13. Okay, so our average is 7.13. Our standard deviation is 1.45. Okay, and to calculate our margin of error, we flip it back to the other page. It says 1.96 times our standard deviation over the square root of how many we have. Okay, so in this situation, it is 1.96. Our standard deviation, according to our calculator, is 1.45. Okay, over the square root, we had 8 players. Watch how I'm going to put this in my calculator. It is going to look just like this right here. 1.96. Parentheses, I am going to get my cute little fraction in alpha y equals. My standard deviation goes on top. On the bottom, square root of 8. All of it is in there in one step. Looks just like what I have written down right here. Hit enter, and my margin of error is a 1.00. Nice little margin of error there. Okay, and just like we did with our basketball scores, or I think there was one that was like age of the basketball players, I take my average and I add the margin of error to it, take the average and subtract it. I'm going to put my cute little U right in here, my two symbols that go the same direction, one on either side. And on this side, I'm doing my average. I am subtracting my margin of error. Over here, I am adding my margin of error. So my confidence interval will be a 6.13 and 8.13. So between 6.13 and 8.13. Okay, number 2, you work for a consumer advocate agency and you collected data on the repair of a washing machine. The average is 100. Okay, you randomly selected 40 people. Standard deviation was 17.5. Okay, they want us to find the margin of error. So when finding margin of error up here, you really don't even need the mean. I only need the mean if I'm finding the confidence interval. Okay, I don't see interval on here. I'm just finding the margin of error. So again, it's my 1.96. My standard deviation of 17.5 over the square root of however many I had, and it said that I did 40 repairs. Okay, again, straight in your calculator in one step. 1.96, parenthesis, go and get your fraction, alpha y equals 17.5 over square root of 40. Okay, you actually have to press the over arrow twice in order to be able to put that last set of parentheses, but whatever, you'll figure it out. Okay, and my margin of error is 5.42. .42 is my margin of error. Okay? If we wanted to find the confidence interval, because of the fact that they already gave us the mean, we can do that. Okay, we add the margin of error to the mean for the one side. Okay, 100 plus that is 105.42. And then we subtract the margin of error from the mean for the other side. And we end up with 94. Was way too close. 94.58 for the other side. Okay, so there's my confidence interval if you wanted to find it. Okay, number 3. A company produces white bread, concerned about distribution and the amount of sodium. Random samples, they took 100 random samples. So there's my N of 100. The average that they found was 103. And the standard deviation was 10. Okay, so my margin of error, 1.96. Standard deviation on top, the square root of my sample size, which was 100. In my trusty calculator, square root of 100. And I get a margin of error of 1.96. Okay, again, we can go ahead and find the confidence interval. Let's do it. Since they gave us the mean, we might as well. Okay, again, this side, I take the average and I subtract the margin of error. On this side, I take the average and I add the margin of error. Okay, so over here, I get oops, just dropped my calculator. I get 101.04. And on the other side, I get 104.96. Remember, this 1.96 is your margin of error. This is your confidence interval. Okay, confidence interval is a range, basically. Your margin of error is a single number. Okay, this one. The actual cook time to cook a 10-pound turkey is normally distributed. Suppose the random sample of 19 to 10-pound turkeys is taken. So we took 19 samples. The average is 2.9. And the standard deviation is 2.4. Find the margin of error and we're going to do the confidence interval. Okay, so margin of error 1.96. Standard deviation on top. Square root of my sample. I took 19 samples of turkeys. So my margin of error is we'll say 1.08. Okay, to find our confidence interval, we will add and subtract it to both sides. Okay, so we have an average right here of 2.9 hours is what they said. So we subtract the confidence interval on the left and we add the confidence interval on the right. Okay, when we subtract it from the left, we get 1.82. And when we add it, we get 3.98. So again, there's your range of hours that it took to actually cook the turkeys. Okay, there's your 95% range right there. And that is it. Okay, you will have 2 days to work on the test review, and when I go over it, I'm going to go over it in 2 different sections. I'm going to do 1 through 10 one day, and the next 10 the next day.